Why is it an issue that the first actual black president, because people love to talk about Bill Clinton as the first black president, which is a conversation for another day. We should probably get James Carville on to talk about that, because that was a big thing growing
I
up.
love that idea.
First
Our
black
label
president.
mate.
Let's just see what happens at the state level. Yeah, like not a surprise.
Wait for it.
Just wait for it.
Wait for it.
The idea, though, that there is something that is resonating, and when you're looking at the everybody needs, both candidates now need enough of a slice of everything else to be able to get to a winning calculus in election math. Why is it an issue that the first actual black president, because people love to talk about Bill Clinton as the first black president, which is a conversation for another day. We should probably get James Carville on to talk about that, because that was a big thing growing up.
I love that idea.
First
Our
black
label
president.
mate.
Why are people upset when the person of the community who had the highest leadership status, who was so highly popular in that community, is telling that community how he relates and how he feels about an issue? Like, is that not, granted, everyone saw it. And I kind of love that everybody can now see what used to be exclusively in community conversations. We can all see them. And if you're smart, you'll learn from that. I've learned a lot from watching conversations that are happening with another, like, LGBTQ communities. Like, oh, okay, these are the nuances of this. Why is everyone else all upset suddenly about Barack Obama telling black male voters, well, if your problem is misogyny, you need to get over it?
Well,
what are you hearing and what are you feeling of? What are they upset about?
That's not what people are upset about. Well, maybe there are some people who are upset about that. What I have heard more of is, one, don't hold black men to a standard, or don't talk to black men in a way you don't talk to other people, right? So nobody's going to white Republican women, right, who are not voting for Kamala Harris and saying, cross finger, like, you need to vote for her if you're not voting for her. And remember, Donald Trump said this about
people did try that though with
Jewish people,
not with Republican
and how
women.
that work out.
Fair. I mean, right, but like, yes, like the
nobody really wants to be lectured to.
When Madeleine Albright said, "Oh, there's a special place in hell for women who don't vote for women," I was like, "Excuse me." Really?
Exactly.
Like,
and
really?
that's how, like, and that's how a lot of men felt like maybe we have issues, and some of them might be sexism, but certainly some of them are sexism.
So it was like
but some of them also are
is it
other
the
things.
Public fact of it and not the.
Well, yeah, there's that. The other thing is, I think Van Jones actually did this right. He said, look, Barack Obama for many of us is like our best achieving, like, a role model, right? Like, he's the one who's got a great family. He's had a great career. He's branching out in the business. He's innovative. He can play basketball and shoot 3-pointers, right? Yeah. Like, he's like this superhero sort of guy. And so when he chastises us, it feels like, or he criticizes us, it feels like chastising. And especially when he doesn't couple it with what I see about you. Right. I see you working hard. I see you trying to take care of your family. I see you battling racism every day. I see you being nervous when the police pull you over. And for those of you, not for all of you, but for those of you who have a problem that's based in sexism, that's not acceptable. Right. Okay. So that's just a different context where we don't go immediately to the critique. We start off with, you know what? You got a hard row. And I know that. But let me tell you what's also bad. You can't take your hardship and transfer that to how you
publicly
deal with it.
Without recognizing. So this is also apparently in leadership training, which I think then also applies to anything you do with children, if you learn in leadership training. But the idea that if you're giving feedback or critique to a subordinate or somebody, really in general, you need it. The negative outweighs emotionally.
You hear the negative louder,
positive.
Right?
Yeah, almost two to three times louder. And so the trick is, for every one negative, you gotta say 2 to 3 positive. And it's not how most of us, right, are actually trained coming up. Like,
it works in marriages too.
It does, actually. That's another conversation.
We'll do that another night, right? Exactly.
I know.
I'm learning. I'll tell you.
Yeah. And that goes beyond the idea of like words of affirmation or love languages. No, like literally the way your body and your brain processes negative information it sparks something different than the positive. So it's a bias towards, we feel negative things about ourselves are more real than how we feel the positive. And so you're talking about a community, Black men, that's already on the receiving end of so much negative public discussion. Okay, thank you. That actually helps me understand it better, because I looked at it and thought about it as like, well, all right, it's like big black dude who's
And
been
so
a big deal talking to other black dudes, since everybody in America right now seems to feel comfortable talking about black dudes and as voters, as opposed to any other time when you've talked about them in history.
it's also that Barack Obama, you know, for those of us who are like of a certain age, we remember 2008. We remember how important Barack Obama as a political and historic figure was. But you got to think about it. Like I had a 26-year-old woman who worked for me when I was at the White House, and I said something about the 2008 campaign, and she looked at me and she goes, "I kind of remember that. I mean, I was in middle school when that happened." I realized, like, oh my gosh, I'm really that old.
Yeah.
But
Yo, I
nobody
have
over the age of 30, nobody under the age of 30 has ever voted for Barack Obama before.
Yeah,
And
that's the
so as
reality.
if you've got a 35 and under problem, right? Your problems with 35 and under men, Barack Obama's not somebody they have the same kind of
Is
emotional
that what the data
connection
is
with
showing right
that
now?
many
That
of us have.
when it comes to the data about black male voters, it's younger black male voters, right? Because
It's mostly, yeah.
it's not
There
millennials
are
and
some middle-aged
boomers,
men for sure, but
right?
it's younger African Americans across genders, but particularly younger African American men, where she's like at 67% or something like that.
Yeah,
Like it's really low.
which
I'm like,
does connect with what I've heard anecdotally in the classroom. So I do teach twice a week, undergraduates and graduates, but even the graduate students are still largely below the age of 30, and they
mm-hmm,
have grown up post Obama, uh,
mm-hmm,
terrible economic circumstances. They know that being able to live on their own, afford a house, all of this, right? Economic promises, the same things do not work that work for now their grandparents or even their parents, right? Like we were
right,
still in the cusp of, okay, if I get a student loan, I still got the college degree. That'll help me get a leg ahead. They're like, nah, y'all are
right.
still paying your student loans. Y'all don't have a house that you could afford and you're still struggling. So like, what are you trying to tell me that this is a good way to proceed? On top of that, they have seen a massive decline in American standing on the world stage. Post Iraq War, post Afghanistan, right? Everything available online, very easy. This is no longer an environment where foreign policy is filtered through diplomats and very like everybody in America can now see globally what is happening and make those connections. And then the third point is this really does get underestimated, climate change. I have heard from so
Mm,
many students like, well, the earth is dying. And I'm shocked that how many of them are actually optimistic that in maybe the next 10 years they can do something about it, 10 or 15 years. And again, these are people in college or graduate students who care already about public policy. If those folks are already this jaded, I can only
yeah,
imagine what a broader social grouping of younger people does. So that is
yeah,
universally a failure, right? Of what I would say boomers who set up the post New Deal era, the liberal world order. The folks who set that up, if their grandkids are so disheartened about what is possible with the American promise, there's a failure there, right? That is a legacy failure. Is the
yeah.
answer to
One of the
that
things that I think
democracy
this
met? Like,
contributes to that.
yeah, does that like what you were talking
I
about?
think what contributes to that is there is, I think social media is a part of this. I think sometimes how we raised our kids to be like a little bit more like we are excited when they like jump up and down 3 times and we're like, yay, you jumped up and down 3 times. We talked about this the other day. But there is something that is like ideologically pure about them, right?
Yeah.
And so hypocrisy
Yeah.
um, is
Hmm.
much more impactful for them in a way, and we have
Mm.
more opportunities to see hypocrisy, right?
That's what it
So
is. It's the
technology has
yep.
made it like obvious when something happens. And you think about the institutions, if you think about the last 25 years or so, like all these institutions that have failed, like the Catholic Church, and like abuse. We've had this Balco problem, like sports, where like
Mm-hmm.
drugging and all that stuff has happened in sports. We've seen the housing crisis, man, and Wall Street almost fail. We've had this, like just one thing after another, where these people who were supposed to know it all, right, got it wrong. And the society, we had a pandemic, right,
Oh,
where
let's
people
be
couldn't
clear.
figure out how to manage it,
I pay
right?
like
All these
we're
people were supposed to be the smart ones and figure out how to manage it, failed. And so
you and
for them,
I
why should they have confidence in us? Like we're just screwing it up.
you and I are paying for social security, which we probably might not ever be able to collect. But I mean, listen, I'm glad seniors, my parents, again, sandwich generation. I loved that Harris brought that up because that is where we are in our age
Yeah.
range of sandwich between elder care and child care. And
Yep.
elders will have their social security. Those systems will be there, but it was designed by them to borrow on the backs of us. It's not going to be around for me. Not going to be around for
Right.
my kids, right? So we
Well,
started
and the
to see
idea
that.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the idea was that we would have a way to keep doing it. But first of all, the good news is people are living longer. I mean, Social Security was only supposed to last for like 5 to 10 years.
Right.
Right.
Y'all
Like
gonna be
everybody
around.
would kind of be dead by 75. So it didn't really matter. But now people are living to be 90. So that's like a different, you could be retired for like 25 or 30 years. So that's a different system. And the Republicans won't increase
If you
taxes.
actually
'Cause
leave your
really,
job, if you
could
actually
solve
leave
this
your
problem.
job and retire,
Yeah, you
maybe
can
make
lose
room
job,
for a younger generation of leaders who are not young anymore.
if you taxed people over, like, I think the threshold is like in the hundred and something thousands. If you taxed all income for Social Security, you could solve the problem, right? Or even like not even all income, but just like another $100,000 of income, you could probably solve the Social Security problem.
But
The problem is Republicans won't let us tax anything for any reason.
Well, the Trump tax cuts do expire in 2025. So this is a big deal. There could suddenly be a lot of money coming in to help fund all of these programs that we're talking about that we all need and we all like. That could come from the people who have just been getting a pass.
So this isn't on our talk sheet, but I want to go here for a second because you're making a really good point. Is the Trump tax cuts will be expired, and then we go back to an era before the Trump tax cuts. But you know what the era was before the Trump tax cuts? It was the era of the Bush tax cuts, right? So this is the thing about conservatives. Conservatives just keep moving the ball further and further in their direction, while we just keep, it seems like on the left, are just playing defense and trying to stop them from doing all the bad things. Where is the offense for us? Where's the point where we start saying, I mean, I guess there are people who are trying to do it, AOC and others, the Green New Deal, which people kind of lambast. But like, we have to start saying, let's have a vision for what the earth looks like, what the society looks like when we're in charge and our values are the predominant ones, not just us playing defense against your aggression against the rest of us.
One of my favorite data points about the military industrial complex is the Eisenhower Institute. General Eisenhower, as president, right? Reconstruction after World War II, knitting all the stuff together. The general himself said, this is the military industrial complex. It will get out of hand, right? This is no longer about a lefty liberal thing about being anti-war. It is just a reality of how we have structured our society and where public money goes. And I will tell you, the young people know. I have students who identify and registered as Republican who are like, we got to cut the military budget. You would never have heard that 30 years ago. So there is the shifting of what's happening, of what is considered right and left. We're living that right now. But I actually really do. I find a lot of hope in the young folks. Like you said, hypocrisy matters to them. They will call it out for what it is, but they do have a set of values, and their starting point of what is considered right and moral for society and how we treat each other is much higher than what we were given. So I'm like, just let them do it. Let them do it.
I do want to button up one thing. Absolutely. I want to button up one thing because here's a place where they won, and I think they deserve credit, right? So we started this before we take off. We started this about African-American men, what happened with black men. Well, one thing we know happened, black men won the day this week. The desire of these black men to say, we want more policy. We want concrete objectives. We want you to come to us and woo us the way you woo every other community in the country. We want you to come to us, Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, and give us something that's real. And this week, we saw the Vice President of the United States put out an opportunity agenda for black men. And in there, she had things about, loans for startups, pathways for education, home ownership to deal with health. We don't talk about sickle cell and prostate and all the things that tend to affect black men in a way that they affect more than white men. So she had an agenda that really lays all that out. I think it's time now for all of us who've been saying, we're the black men, go out there, sell this to these guys, let them know what this agenda is, and then say, you know what, you're not going to be taken for granted. And if you stand up and say what you want, somebody will come to you with a real life agenda. And when they support you, it's time for you to support them. Well, right? You got to show them that if they support you, you support them. And now is that time. I'd rather have that conversation with these guys than have a conversation about what you're supposed to do because everybody told you is what you're supposed to do.
Fair. Completely get that. But that goes back to where we started, which is when people say, oh, well, what are you going to do for me? Is that really what they're asking for as a policy prescription? It is good to have. You need to have it. You need to be able to pivot to it and point to it and say it. But what they're ultimately saying is, I don't feel that you got my back. And how you address the feeling is not with facts. You need
Right.
those. And that to me is fascinating from every community. It's just like that weird feeling we have. How Donald Trump has managed to give people feelings that they will act on is fascinating. But it works, right? Like that's clearly like he gave different segments and different minority groups the feeling that, ooh, you're right. Maybe some of the people that, you know, I've been in community with or I identify with, maybe they don't really have my back, right? And just understand what that whisper in your ear does to you. And I think that's the right, trying to combat that is the feeling and the emotion part that needs to go with the factual basis. Like, really, but do you really think that guy has your back? We'll see. Jamal, love talking to you. I know we both got to get running with the rest of our days and families and everything. And I hope we will catch up again soon. And obviously, people, everybody else, can you make sure you sign, register, click on numbers and lines and subscription things and stars? We do. I like 5. I like 5 stars.
5 stars, and follow us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts, all the places you get podcasts. Is that right?
Yes.
Am I getting this right, Nayyera?
I think we got it right.
All right.
I think we want to hear from you guys. We want to hear from everybody who's been sitting here listening to us the whole time. And that way we can keep you in the loop. Thank you, everyone.